Faith specifically as a concept, I've read some teachings or heard some teachings of Gurudev that may talk really strongly about faith in one certain way, one certain definition of the word. And I've also heard stories almost to the counter of that, where I've heard a story from one gentleman here who's met Gurudev very shortly after arriving in America, in the very first week he was here. And one of the first things he said that he told Gurudev was, he was really enthralled by Gurudev's presence, he said, and started a conversation and said, look, I just want you to know, though, I don't believe in anything. And Gurudev said, it was so happy. He said, good, good, good. I don't want any sheep. I'm not looking for sheep for students. You should question. I mean, decide for yourself. Go through this. And so I hear stories like that, and it's really encouraging that, faith isn't, and I've heard him say this, faith doesn't necessarily mean blind faith, stupid faith, ignorant faith. That a good, whole faith may be more something akin to how you were saying the word God isn't some individual bearded maker in the clouds, but maybe a nature, the universe, cosmic consciousness. And faith can be understood in a similar way of not having to be belittled in an ignorant way, but referring to something on a much more grandiose scale.
To emphasize what we're talking about in terms of, deciding for yourself, I feel it's so important because there is no letting yourself off the hook. Like you go through your day, you have to make, decisions, even if you take on the decision that there's a force working through you, or that you've taken on the decision that I'm going to trust a set of laws or a text, you've still decided to be a follower of that organization. So there's actually no way to not take responsibility for your life. So to me, it's like, if that's the case, I might as well embrace the fact that I'm the one deciding, on that level. And for me, with, integral yoga and being here, perhaps the most important teaching is that, truth is one, paths there are many. Yeah, so like right there, what does that say? What does that mean? That means that, I have faith in the truth. I don't need to tell anyone else to go my path. Gurudev says that all the time, don't just follow my path. I'm going to take my way up the mountain. You're going to take your way, and we'll meet at the top of truth.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah, and I was actually just, before we started this, thinking about integral yoga and what integral yoga means. And I kind of think about it in two ways, actually. So there's a more specific way and a more general way. In the specific way, it would be a certain set of practices and teachings, a holistic approach to yoga and wellness that were presented by Swami Satchidananda and that have roots in through his guru, Shivananda, and on back. And that's what is most pronounced here at the ashram and throughout the other integral yoga institutes. But then on a broader level, and I've heard Gurudev mention this as well, that integral yoga could really be defined as any practice that leads that leads one closer to the experience of supreme peace. Anything. And that could look totally different than doing a downward facing dog. I mean, and I like keeping both of those in mind. That for the same reason that you just mentioned of how many different paths there are to go up the mountain. And we should always be actively reflective to make sure we're not trying to hinder somebody else's path or somehow push ourselves on somebody else in some kind of oppressive way.
And that probably comes right into the yoga teaching. Your hatha practice, I would imagine, when you're the teacher, you are leading people through an experience, but then they're also each individuals having an experience on their mat too.
That's a really beautiful image. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And actually, that's so. Yeah, I think about something similar with the integral yoga approach to hatha classes, which is definitely an emphasis on ease, on gentleness, certainly not the same direction as maybe a more exercise style of yoga practice, hatha yoga practice. And one of the benefits I see from that is that it's much safer to then let people perhaps explore their own balances, their own limits, their own sensations of what's working for them, so that for one person, maybe you're instructing a pose, and it's almost like you give the bare minimum for here's what you need to do to be safe, and here's the direction you're going. But within that spectrum of possibility, there's a lot of possibility. So maybe you look like this, maybe you look like this. It could really vary a great deal. And by creating a setting where you're not trying to get everyone to be so precisely exact, even when it comes, and I guess I'm speaking somewhat for myself individually as a teacher, that you want to provide, say, anatomical cues that are safe and that are healthy for the body. But I personally don't want to ever be so exacting with things that it doesn't allow for variability with people, that people's bodies are going to express in different ways, and their process of relaxing tension physically and in more deep, subtle ways is going to look different. And so allowing for flexibility there.